Welcome all, goblins and ghouls of the internet. I am your Hanyo, the demonic cinephile, and we are here to talk about episode 3 of Interview with the Vampire. It's my very nature of that of the devil. As the episode starts off, we have Louis and Lestat sitting in the park as Lestat is reading about the history of the park. Louis corrects him that the book does not display anything of the treatment of runaway slaves. If I remember right, Louis said that they were pinned to the railings. No, they were spiked on the gate, or the city gate. And once again, with that, just playing it off like, oh, well, that's sad. Then we get to the part that really kind of bugged me. So as the conversation goes on, Louis is asking, why are they here? Why do vampires exist? Did they simply evolve from humans, or there some higher calling? And Lestat just doesn't really brush it off, but says, well, that's why does it matter? We are what we are. Then when Louis keeps bringing it up, like, well, there has to be some bigger reason why we are here. And he comes to the idea that him and Lestat should stop eating just anybody, and they should focus on the evil doers of the world. Which comes to a pretty funny scene where Lestat and Louis are reading the minds of the people down the street, from petty theft to a liar, a drinker. Eventually they run across a true criminal, where Lestat breaks his back and he offers him to Louis, but Louis still cannot go with it, and he eats a nearby cat. Now the reason why I don't, if you read the books, not just the original interview, because the original interview does not talk about this, it's brought up in the interview movie, but in the rest of the series, is made specifically stated that Lestat does not really drink good people. He's not going to go hungry. If I remember correctly, he'll eat an innocent person if he truly needs to. But more or less, Lestat goes after criminals. He goes after evildoers. He hunts and stalks them for a bit until he can no longer control himself, or until he thinks the person has suffered enough. And that was kind of a fun thing about not really, probably fun, not the right word I want to use, intriguing with Lestat's character. Is how brash he is. You think he wouldn't care. And I don't like, to be honest, I don't really like how they're giving that to Louis. Because that's one negative thing about this portrayal of Lestat, is how gun-ho he is with just offing off normal people. And they're giving this idea of morality to Louis, which isn't out of character for Louis. It is out of character for Lestat to simply shrug it off and to think that the killings, the purposely of eating normal evil people, the fact that they gave this trait to Louis instead of Lestat is a weird change and contradiction to their characters, which I think they're going with something with that, and I hope they do. As the episode keeps going, you get to this scene at their club, and it's a pretty interesting scene. or Lestat basically does find out that Louis is just too ashamed of his vampire nature, that the ideas of morality, the ideas of eating cats and rats, are simply just the way to go along with his condition. And I do like this. They had this one scene where Lestat shows up, the pianist, the man. He shows up, the man who plays the piano. That's what he does. And yeah, so Lestat shows up, the pianist. Lestat shows up, the pianist. Motherfucker. At the club. And this leads to Louis revealing to Daniel that the song that Lestat improvised that night will eventually become a famous song that the guy he showed up will later make into his own. And then we get to the interesting thing. This is the reason why. So, what Daniel does, he compares Louis' notes 76 to today, and how his contradictions with Lestat, how in the original interview he said Lestat was a boorish, he was rude, he was a twig, he was nothing to me. Here he's confessing all his love for Lestat, that Lestat was, even with how he put it in the show, a lot. And Louis is revealing that those tapes were a performance. This is the true interview, his true thoughts, his true memories, as best he can recall. And that was the one thing I didn't really like about the show when it was being promoted. All the other changes, I can get behind, even though I didn't fully want them to happen. This one change, I still cannot understand why they are doing it. Why they're basically saying that the book isn't the truth, which, in retrospect, that Anne Rice herself did make that happen. That Louis did fabricate a lot during the interview. I'm about to say that, I don't know. It's just this one change that the old interview happened, but it just wasn't right. So it kind of rubs me the wrong way. But as we go on, we have this very fun interaction with Louis and Lestat as the two bring a woman back to their bar, and Lestat he's playing with her, seducing her, and she gets curious, like, oh, I heard stories about Louis and Lestat. Basically, that the rumors have spread about them, that everyone kind of already knows that they are lovers. And Lestat's like, oh, yeah, but, well, in so many words, Lestat explains to her that we have an open relationship. And when Louis leaves, because he does not want to witness the death of the singer, he comes back to find that Lestat spared her. That her musical talents were her saving grace for him. That he fed off a dentist who was passing through the area, with Lestat remarks that he was thinking horrible things about molars and braces, or something to that equivalent. And we get this fun interaction from Louis, where Lestat's saying, I just need variety every now and again. It was like, so I can fuck whoever I want. It was that. I love the look on his face. He's like, of course. Which is the silent panic of, oh God, what did I do? And we get introduced to a short character by the name of Paul. Now, if I can remember right, this character is supposed to be based off another person from the novel. It was... Give me 1 minute. Okay, I couldn't find the character's name. I cannot remember, but in the novel, there was a woman Louis was interested in. He liked her, kind of maybe loved her, maybe they're just friends. It was left very vague about his feelings for her. And we get this character in the show called Paul. Paul just got back from the army. He and Louis were kind of a thing. Maybe a fling here and there back in the past before he left. And as they're catching up, you can see in the background, well, not really background, they do cut to it like once or twice, but of Lestat watching the pair, watching down, looking down at them, and you can feel his jealousy fester. And it was a good little predator moment for our prince. And Louis and Paul, they go to the bayou. I think that's what they call the bayou, the swamp. They go to the swamp. They talk. Louis admits to being with someone, but they do have an arrangement. And as Paul gets on his knees for Louis, Louis is so compelled by his feelings, which urge into the bloodlust, and he has to bite himself to basically kind of like to stave off the sensation. And that's another thing I want to compare to the books real quick. In the books, now I hear this changes later on. See, so for the Chronicles, I only read up to what's his name? What's it called? The Devil, Minnoch the Devil. And after that, I read Victorio, Pandora, and the Vampire Armand. So I don't know what happens after the Minnoch. I have heard things. I haven't read full descriptions. I do hear later on that vampires get more sexual by how it was described in the earlier books. The ones I have read, the vampires cannot have sex. They all, even that part of their body more or less becomes numb, or simply becomes no different from the flesh on their hands or their face. It is no more sensitive. Only thing that vampires do have in terms of sexuality is blood. The pleasure of feeding and killing is very comparable to the act of sex, and even the closeness with them and their victim is the intimacy is described as very sexual in nature as well. Now, I don't really care that they're making like, oh, they can have sex now. That's a minor change, but I do find it kind of silly, and not really silly, but funny, because Anne Rice more or less did create the sexy vampire trope, or at least she was one of the very first to pioneer it before it became super crazy with Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Lost Boys and eventually Twilight. And I always kind of find it interesting that her sexy vampires, who everyone's so attracted and lured to, can't really get it on. Or they kind of can, they just don't find it interesting or fun. It pales in comparison to the act of killing. And when Lestat and Louis comes home to Lestat, they do talk about Louis' little fling. And as Louis gets ready for bed, he notices Lestat's muddy boots in the room. Then we cut back to the interview, where Danielle is pressing onto Louis about the boots. That was it raining? Can you remember? And we do have this nice little scene where they are showing that Louis is remembering him and Paul in the forest as regular as it was shown before. But when Daniel mentions the rain, it shows rain. Now I hope this is bigger hints that Louis is fabricating more tales, because his interview does have an agenda. He does want people to be aware of vampires. He wants Daniel to publish this book as soon as possible. So I do hope we get to see that. Maybe, not really hope, but maybe this could be more hints that Lewis is lying. Lewis is lying. He has an agenda, and he is going to push it and sell the story the best way possible. We then cut to, I think, the most interesting scene in the show. Not the show. The most interesting scene in the episode where Louis is returning to his home, and you see his sister's daughters, the twins. They're running. They're calling him a ghost. His own mother is trying to deny him into the house, calling him the devil. The devil walks at night. And Louis' brother-in-law comes in basically to play bouncer for the mother. And Louis gets so frustrated, so angry, he kicks the door. But when he kicks it, because he's a vampire, the door flies off its hinges and goes into the hallway. It hits a shelf. It bounces around. It bounces down. It was a cool display of how, giving us to show how strong Louis is at the current moment, and maybe that cool see how strong he is in the modern timeline. But when we see, I like that we actually get to see that Louis' family is scared of him. They call him a ghost. They think he's a demon, and this is kind of like their big proof that he's not even human anymore. They don't know. They probably don't know he's a vampire. Vampire is probably not the first thing that they would think. But I do like this because in the book, Louis' family was never really talked about. They were talked about. We never really got to spend any time with them. We are told Louis was able to keep his nature from his sister before she moved out. But here they all kind of already know. And it's sad because from what we could tell, Louis' sister was the only person besides Paul, and they really knew Louis to kind of understand him. She never really said that, oh, Louis, we all know how you feel about guys. No, but it's very much implied that she knows him and Lestat are lovers. That she seemed to be a center for him, and to see her so scared of him, you can see it breaking Louis. Even with him having the glasses on, you can tell how shattered he is. This is immediately just suppose when Louis returns home and he sees and Lestat has brought in all these soldiers and thrown a huge party. They're all drunk while he's playing at the piano, and Louis like, oh, come on, Louis, it's so fun. You can fuck them, hell, I can eat them. We have this very interesting scene. It's very where, okay, so when Louis demands Lestat to make everyone leave, instead of shouting at them or doing anything, Lestat pulls a little Professor X. He puts his finger to his temple. He closes his eyes, and all the soldiers are suddenly put under a spell, and they vacate the premises. Now, this is something the vampires can do in the novel. I think it was called the Mind Gift. or the cloud gift, something to cloud a person's will to make a for a vampire to either convince them to do something or to make them not notice something. I don't think it could ever be done like this before, so that was kind of interesting. And once again, and I like you see it takes a toll on Lestat that he suddenly becomes much weaker. He starts to bleed from his ears. I think he even becomes a bit paler. Or I kind of like seeing that Lestat isn't super invulnerable. He does have his weaknesses. The story of the episode kind of shifts. We go to Louis talking with the alderman and the other people on the city council, the businessman that Louis bought the club from, and that they are, I can't remember what they essentially called it, but there is a law to make sure that certain people, like people of color, cannot operate these businesses. They cannot operate brothels, basically. Or it was that they cannot mix. And Louis retaliates, but he puts on a big colors only sign to, and you see him being laughed at by his former subordinate, and eventually leads to violence. The club getting hackled by the police. Louis, he neglects feeding for, it's said to be several days, or it could be weeks. We're not exactly sure. Time kind of flies. Then we get to the second best moment of the episode, where Louis visits the alderman in his apartment, in his home, and lets all his vampire nature flow. He bites him, he attacks him, he reads his mind, he torments him, slices his ear off. You see Louis lose himself in the kill. He has some rage to him when he shots back to the alderman the remark of him being arrogant. But I do like it because we do see Louis lose himself to these predatory natures. He's no longer suffering because he has to drink blood. He's no longer sad about losing his family, the brothel being lost to him. That rage is kind of going away for a moment. Right now, he is enjoying himself. He is in the kill. He is the lion about to eat the helpless little lamb that thought it had a chance to get away. And that is very much with Louis in the book. Because in the book, Louis, he would get those moments where when he was eating humans, he just didn't really care. He went after any person, really, if I remember correctly. He once sat down with a painter who wanted to paint a portrait for him. And about halfway through, when Louis could no longer contain himself, he fed and killed the boy, only to feel sad later on when he realized how good the painting was. And there is a very obvious, probably not obvious, I don't want to use that word, but you can make kind of like a connection with drugs, or since vampires feeding is very sexual, maybe, just numbing your pain with alcohol, with sex, with anything to not feel what you're feeling. And we kind of see it's not done to how it's done in the book, but you can kind of see it with this scene where Louis just is having the time of his life, probably in a long time. And it calls back to the beginning of the episode where Louis was talking about how they would spike runaway slaves on the fence. Well, Louis spikes the gutted remains of the alderman on the, I guess, seemed to be a government office. And the episode ends with the city breaking out in riots Louis' club is burning down. People are getting attacked to the point even Lestat is saying this carnage is too much even for me. But Lestat is still overjoyed with this. He's overjoyed that Louis let his vampire nature kick in, and he even opts for this to become their anniversary. That the people down there are the so-called good people that Louis didn't want to always eat. They look at them now. You made them mad, you gave them a reason, and now they're going wild. And Louis fights back. That is why you will always be alone. Which, ouch, for Lestat. As the episode ends, we see Louis going down one of the neighborhoods, seeing if he could help someone. Anyone as possible. Okay, which this part I did not understand. Louis went down there to help everyone. And we see people throwing cocktails into homes, burning them down. We see people getting attacked on the street. But Louis doesn't do anything. Like, he states through the interview that he went there to help, but he doesn't help. I mean, he uses all-powerful vampire who can run faster than the eye can see. He can slice your ear off with just his nails. He can read your thoughts. Why isn't Louis doing anything to help? The episode ends with Louis saying he will find his redemption, his light, his Claudia. And we get to see Claudia briefly. She's in silhouette behind flames. We do not really get to meet Claudia. She's teased. We'll meet Claudia in the next episode. Forgot to mention, after Lestat makes the soldiers leave the house, him and Louis have this fight where Louis does mention that Lestat was creeping on him and Paul, watching them in the forest. Even after Lestat said, "It's okay, you can be with other guys." And Lestat says, and he explodes with rage, how emotional he becomes, where he says, "Yes, I said we could be with other people, but they mean nothing. I have all these affairs, but they are nothing. I heard your heart dance with his heart in that swap. Then I saw you turn 20 miles later to eat a dog and 2 rats." And you can see the conflict between these two dark lovers are festering. Where the point where Louis can no longer enjoy his life to the fullest is taking a toll even on Lestat. That Lestat is becoming very jealous that Louis was having a moment with someone else besides him. And I do hope how this is going to work with introduction to their daughter in the next episode. My overall opinions on this episode is I think it's better than episode 2. Episode 2 went by a little too fast pace for me. So did this one. And when I heard they were making a series about Interview with the Vampire, I was very ecstatic. Mostly because you would have a bunch of time to tell this story. And they are making I don't use the word mistake. Once again, I want to see how the season goes on and develops. But they are doing something that even I had mixed feelings about in the original novel, and that is the fact that Louis is skipping over huge jumps in time. The first episode and a good portion of the second episode take place in 1910. And that later half of episode 2 and the entirety of this episode take place around 1917. And I noticed that when we see the girls, his nieces are grown, not grown, they're like 7 years old or 6 years old. And it like feels so much time has been passed. We didn't really get a chance to breathe with the story. I really do think this show needed, quote unquote, like a filler episode. Just an episode where we can breathe in the world, breathe in the moment. This episode could have been focused majority on Lewis and his family, him drifting away from them. This could have been the episode where we do have the scene where he almost eats the baby. This could be the scene where he does something more to prove like he's supernatural. Maybe he reads another mind and he talks out loud like they said it with their mouth. And with the scene, you can show more of their aging. I know 7 years isn't too much for a person. Like you're not gonna get like gray hairs immediately, like 7 years in the future. But this could have been a good way to show for his family to notice that he's not changing. Like he has no, his hair is exactly the same. How everything is, that he's not changing. The age has no effect on him anymore. He could break a brick with his bare hands. Not sure why he would do that, but I'm just saying, example of strength. Not too much like him kicking the door down with this episode, but something else to show that for them to have the hint that he is something more, for his mother to truly believe that he is the devil. Now we know why she thinks he's the devil. She thinks he told Paul to kill himself. She thinks he's the devil because he's gay. She thinks he's the devil. Oh, basically only 2 reasons. We do have a scene where episode 2 where he does read her mind and he corrects her. But once again, that only happened once. In the timeline state, that happened like 7 years ago. We don't know if more things like that happen. I think this should have been stretched just a little bit. And I hope they do this with the later episodes. I hope we just don't get more montages with the 3 being a family. I really hope we do settle on a moment, at least a series of moments, to help build the family dynamic of Lestat, Louis, and Claudia. Because in the novel, it's hard to remember, but in the novel, we didn't really get that. Maybe once or twice with Louis' monologue. It shows more effective in the movie, I want to say. Because we actually get to see the monologue. We see Louis and Lestat being tentative parents to Claudia. How Lestat treats her as his pupil and is delicate with her to an extent. And I do hope we get to take that from the movie, but expand upon it. At least make it 1 full episode. Hopefully 2 of them being a family. Because I don't know how the season's going to end, but I'm pretty sure it's going to end with Lestat's supposed death. Sorry if I'm spoiling the novel, but I said to say supposedly his hands at Claudia. So season 2 is probably going to take place all in Europe. If they're still doing that plot line, which I hope they do. I don't want them to change the novel too much. So I do hope we can still get to meet Armand and the Theta de Vampires. Yeah, in conclusion, this was a interesting episode. It was fun. I'm still loving the show. I just hope they slow down. Don't rush the story. Let this breathe. Because The performances are amazing, but I don't want more side characters being sidelined, I guess you could say. And with how Claudia will be portrayed, I'm not sure how she will be portrayed. I hope she's portrayed as an equal, as a new main character and not some side character, which I don't think they will. But I do have my worries because, like I said, the family members were treated as main characters in the first episode, but then they got sidelined in 2 and 3. So I just don't hope the same thing happens with Claudia. Well, that was my thoughts on Interview with the Vampire, episode 3. What were your thoughts about the episode? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Please put down in the comments down below. Videos I put out in the future and more reviews of this show, please hit the subscribe button down below. I very appreciate it. Till then, see you next time.